Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Today on the show, a little bonus episode for you. We were able to talk to Philadelphia Eagles quarterback, at least at this point, Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Josh McCown for an interview just a couple days ago, and wanted to catch up with Josh. Honestly, I wanted to catch up with him right after the season, but in case you weren't paying attention to what happened to the Eagles, they played in the playoffs. Josh had to come in the game when Carson Wentz got hurt against the Seahawks, and then Josh played through a very painful injury. He tore his hamstring off the bone. That was the prognosis, or diagnosis, I should say, after the game when it was, reviewed on what happened to him, in that playoff game against the Seahawks, and he tore his hamstring off the bone. And so Josh and I have been communicating back and forth about trying to tape something a little more recent to that game. But the more I thought about it, obviously he needed to heal up. I thought it was better in retrospect to tape it when we did, which was in the middle of February, and look back 6 weeks or so and see kind of how he's feeling, how he's doing, how he's healing up. And it's interesting, if you watch on Amazon Prime, there's a show called All or Nothing, and the latest episodes, or the latest season of All or Nothing, features the 2019 Philadelphia Eagles. So I've watched a couple episodes already, and I haven't seen the end where Josh finished that game against the Seahawks, but it's kind of interesting to watch that season through Amazon's eyes and then talk to Josh about how that season played out through his eyes here on the podcast. Josh, obviously a very open man of faith, loves Jesus, and really walked into a situation with the Eagles that has been one of faith over the past couple years, certainly when they won the Super Bowl, and Nick Foles and Carson Wentz and Zach Ertz and guys who are very open about their faith in the Lord. And then Josh walking into that wonderful culture of faith and football that's playing out in Philadelphia, and a team that's been in the playoffs now 3 straight years in the Eagles. So this was a really great conversation. We're going to learn about how Josh is doing with regards to his injury, what it was like to kind of come into that situation with the Eagles as a backup quarterback, playing in that game against the Seahawks, and kind of what he was thinking as he was going through an injury that he had suffered but knew that he had to keep playing. By the way, his first ever playoff game at the age of 40. And then what faith was like in the locker room this year with Philadelphia. And then what's next? What's going to be the case for Josh McCown in 2020? He addresses all of that here on the show. Take a listen to Josh McCown joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Jason. Thank you for having me on.
It's great to talk to you, Josh. We're taping this in mid-February, so it's been, I guess, what is that, 5 weeks or so since your last game, I guess, that you played, that last Philadelphia Eagles playoff game. Of course, let's start with the injury and how you're doing. You had a torn hamstring in that last game and continued to play through it. How are you feeling right now?
I'm getting better. It's a slow process, but I had surgery, got the hamstring fixed, and so now it's just a matter of allowing it to heal. And so doctors did an amazing job, and just now I gotta be patient and let the healing take place. But everything's in a good place and moving forward. So excited about hopefully getting to walk soon.
Have you ever had an injury like this before?
I have not, and so kind of retroactively, my heart goes out to all the guys that I've looked at in the locker room or watched, coming out of the locker room dealing with a major injury, and just how bad that disappointment is that sinks in when you can't, especially when you lose some of your normal functions and being able to walk and stuff like that. And so it's a good reminder of how precious our health is, and just to be thankful of those healthy days, because you never know when it can change.
When we were watching that Eagles game that you played against the Seahawks, and just the whole threshold of emotions that go through that, right? Like, you're not planning to play. You don't necessarily want to be playing because Carson's there, and then he gets hurt, and you come in, and then you tear your hamstring off the bone. That was the injury, and I don't think I alluded to that other than just how the hamstring is doing. How in the world are you able to play with a torn hamstring off the bone. Did you know something was wrong in the midst of that game, and yet you just realized, I got to keep going here?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was kind of it. We had two quarterbacks dressed, Carson and myself, and so Carson goes down, and I knew, it was my game the rest of the way. And he went in for some, from checks and stuff during halftime, and so I didn't know if he'd be coming back. And then we got in there, and they said he's not coming back. And shortly before half, I felt a pop in my hamstring, and so we talked about it at halftime, and there was nobody else, so it was just kind of having to go, and so the doctors did a good job, and the training staff did a good job of let me know what had happened and where my limitations would be. We didn't really know the severity of it at that time, but just said a prayer at halftime, and just by the grace of God, I was able to go back out there and fight. It wasn't probably I guess 100%, but the momentum of your team and the teammates around you and the gravity of the game, I think for me was just enough to kind of push me forward and give me the juice and the adrenaline to go out there and play. And we didn't get it done, but I had a lot of fun and something that I look back on, throughout my career, and not having the opportunity to have played in a playoff game. I think it was special. And like I said, obviously as a competitor, you want to win, but we fought hard, and I was proud of everybody's effort.
Yeah, you're 40 years old and playing in your first playoff game. I have to imagine, if you can even walk a little bit, you're not coming out of that game unless they actually, cart you off or something, right?
Exactly. I mean, you everything's kind of come to this, and you're exactly right. At 40, the reality is, I don't know how many more of these things will take place, and a game itself, let alone a playoff game. So for me, it was just I'm going to play for my team. I'm going to do everything I can to help us win a football game and make the most of this moment.
Josh McCown's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. So, back in July, you and I were talking. You had announced, I think it was even before that you were going to come work for my former company, work for ESPN and be a broadcaster. And then all of a sudden you're wearing pads and practicing with the Eagles. And then you find yourself, if you fast forward a few months, playing in a playoff game. So this had to be kind of a whirlwind season for you, really a whirlwind year for you. So go back about a year from now, February of last year, maybe March of last year, and where your mindset was on playing again, and then maybe take us through all that kind of transpired to get you back on the field to be a football player again.
Right. Yeah. I kind of got out of the season, and I thought it would be done, but I don't know if in my heart necessarily if I really had truly completely closed that door. But I started doing some things, as you mentioned, with ESPN, doing some TV stuff that turned into a TV deal with them, that I was going to, begin employment with them and start working on a regular basis. And part of that was, announcing retirement in June and closing that door. And I was really kind of focused that way, and had been working at the high school here in Charlotte, Myers Park, where my sons are both participants in the football program and in the basketball program. So I was just kind of excited, moving forward in that regard. And then, got a call during camp, and we had just kind of finished the practice, with our own football team, a high school team here, and got a call, from my agent and got on the phone with Doug and Howie and started to talk and discuss going to Philly. And my first answer was no. I kind of had peace about where I was. And as we talked more and more, and as I dialogued with my family, they were just having gone through every kind of phase of my career and stops along the way. And most of my opportunities had been in transitions, where a group is, coming into a new head coach and they're starting up, they're rebuilding or whatever they're going through. And so I've always kind of been that guy, the stopgap guy, or the guy to come in, help hold the locker room together as they rebuild a young team or something like that. So my family, the fact that it was the Philadelphia Eagles and the recent success that they'd had and been a playoff team and a Super Bowl team, they were just kind of like, Dad, you got to take this opportunity. This is an awesome opportunity. And so discussed it with Philly at length, and Doug and Howie were very gracious with me as far as giving me time to kind of come to a conclusion that fit everybody. And I let them know this high school team that I invested so much time in throughout the spring and summer, that meant a lot to me. And I wanted to be able to get back down here on our off days as much as possible. And I wasn't going to miss any meetings or anything with Philly, but I just wanted them to know, like, this is where the rest of my time is going to be. And so they were completely understanding of that and excited about that. And so we made it work with the schedule. And next thing I know, I'm in the middle of a preseason game 5 days later, playing against the Baltimore Ravens. So it was a little bit of a whirlwind, but one that I'm thankful, that we were able to talk through, pray through with my family, and come to a good conclusion to be a part of the Eagles.
I have to imagine, having played 16 seasons previously, that helped prepare you to be able to put yourself in a position to play that quickly and turn around and join a team, whereas 10 years ago, maybe that's not the case. Am I fair to say that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think a lot more things would have been up in the air at that point, including, like you're saying, just the ability to play and play well in general. Those things are, but when you've played as long as I have, the ability to come in and go, okay, I can figure out a system, I can learn it, I can manage the football game. You feel a little bit more confident to do that. So that was like probably the lowest part of the decision process for me. It was more of just, my family, is this something that I feel like, is this something I feel like God's leading me in, that I'm supposed to be doing? How does my family feel about this? Are we in one accord about it? And then, can I work out, the situation with the high school to make sure the position is covered, everything's, I'm not leaving anybody hanging. And so those are really the main things. Like, it was funny. Like, once I got in the game, like throwing the football and making that was the easy part. I was like, I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
But it was getting those other variables settled that really made it a smooth transition.
As we intersect the conversation to a little deeper as regards to faith, tell me about arriving in that Eagles locker room. They have a really good culture of faith that's kind of already been established there, when your quarterback and your head coach have professed publicly about their faith in the Lord. Tell me about arriving there and just kind of instilling your faith and beliefs. If you don't, I'm not forcing it on anybody, obviously, but just kind of adapting into that culture that's already been established there in Philly.
Yeah, I think the main thing, it's cool when you have an organization and a locker room that is so accepting of everybody's belief system. And then obviously you have somebody in the head coach position and the quarterback position that's open about their faith. I think it allows for guys that are interested in that, or guys that are believers, so to speak, to be able to feel comfortable, in their skin and be able to, feel comfortable leaning on that faith as they go through the journeys of an NFL season. And I think the main thing for me was just to come in and do, like you said, I think a lot of times we put the cart before the horse in faith talks, and we want to talk about what we believe in more than we want to live what we believe in. And because sometimes that's a lot easier.
Yeah.
As the saying goes, easier said than done. And so I think for me, it was just to come in and do the job well. I think that represents my faith better than anything, is to come in and do the job well, whatever that job is. And it was for backup quarterback and to kind of be a veteran voice in the locker room and all those things. So to walk alongside the already strong group that's there. And so that was my main focus, and then the opportunities to be a part of Bible studies and things like that, where we would gather and talk, just to bring a different perspective and to bring an older perspective, I guess, to a bunch of young guys. But it was really cool to be a part of, and there's some really good men in that locker room that care deeply about their faith, and not only just from an outward sense, so to speak, but from an inward, like they really want to journey with God the right way and to do it the right way and to live the right way. And so it was very encouraging.
Were you able to participate in Bible studies and chapel services, knowing that you were traveling back and forth to Charlotte and kind of making yourself available to the high school team that you had previously talked about in our last question? Were you able to still participate and be a part of some of those things?
Yeah, some of them not as much as I would like, obviously because of traveling or sometimes during, like, on a weekend, if my family was up, I might not be able to get to chapel because I want to spend a little bit more extra time with them. Trying to maximize my time with them. But for the most part, I would say, over half of all those things I was able to get to and be a part of. And like I said, that's, those are part and parcel to the faith walk in general is gathering and encouraging one another. But for me, more important was the times in between those moments, and understanding that doing the job well is a representation of my faith, and that speaks volumes to people who may not share the same faith, or who may need a word of encouragement. That if they understand what you believe in, but they understand the integrity that you go about your job, and the intensity that you go about your job, that they can trust what you're saying when you give them a word of encouragement, and maybe that's something that draws them closer, or gets them interested in that conversation of faith. So in that regard, I kind of allowed that to be my focus more than just being able to actually be in a Bible study all the time, or be able to be at chapel all the time, which are important things, but equally as important is just the day-to-day of living it out.
We'll get back to our conversation with Josh McCown in a moment, but want to take a second to tell you about our Sports Spectrum magazine. A great way to sow into the ministry of Sports Spectrum is by subscribing to our magazine. It's $18 for an entire year subscription. Get you our quarterly magazine, 4 issues, plus a couple bonus issues. And it's a great outreach tool. On the back of every magazine inside is a gospel message that will help others enter into a relationship and understand the gospel of Jesus, and why it's so important and imperative to say yes to the Lord and begin a relationship with God. So check it out, the Sports Spectrum magazine, available right now. You can subscribe over at sportspectrum.com. That's the website, sportspectrum.com. You'll see a little magazine icon. You can click it and you can subscribe right there, or you can give us a call toll free, 866-821-2971. 866-821-2971, and subscribe to the Sports Spectrum magazine today. Now back to our conversation with quarterback Josh McCown right here on Sports Spectrum. You've been a player for a lot of different teams that have rabid fan bases. Talking about, just looking at the list here, the Raiders, certainly the Bears, the last couple of years with the Jets. And then this year you come to Philadelphia, and everybody knows the reputation and the noise that's surrounded by just being a member of the Eagles. They actually have the All or Nothing video that's out on Amazon now that kind of looks back at this season that we're discussing here. And I just want to focus on Carson for a minute, because there's so much noise and scrutiny, and just, you were a broadcaster for a little bit there in that time, so people are asking questions and all these things. And yet everything I've seen about Carson Wentz from the different people I've talked to, and certainly from his play on the field, the dude's a stud, just speaks volumes about who he is. Can you just kind of add to that a little bit, and having spent time with him these past 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the cool thing about kind of going from, like you said, that TV side, the analyst side. And like my last day, as I was making the decision to come to Philly, I had it was like my first or second day in Bristol. And so
Yeah.
I had to sit down and do NFL Live, and I had to do a segment on what I would tell Carson Wentz if I was a veteran quarterback in the room. And then 2 days later, I was a veteran quarterback in the room. So I sat down to look at the rundown for that show, and I was like, you can't make this stuff up. And of course, it wasn't public knowledge yet that I was going to Philly. So I was like, man, nobody knew about it except me. And so I'm like, man, you can't make this stuff up. It's funny, but I had a perception of kind of him as a player and him as a person. And, I'd met him briefly before, but not really spent any amount of time with him. And so different things obviously always come out of locker rooms, and everybody carries different opinions. And then you get to meet somebody, and I've always tried to carry that through my career. Just no matter what somebody tells me about someone else, what do I think about them? Like, what's my experience with them?
Yep.
And I'll be able to make my own judgment. And so that was awesome. It was good to get to know Carson and to get to see, from a player standpoint, what a gifted player he is, and just, physically, mentally, just this really special talent. And then just how much he cares for this organization and the guys, and leading this group the right way, and how competitive he is, day in and day out to get that done. And I think, as you talked about earlier, just as a part of different things, how much he wanted to include everyone in what he was doing. And I think that's a growing process. I think sometimes as a young player, you get so concerned with like, and bogged down with like, how do I do my job? And just like, and rightfully so, focus on doing your job. That I think it was cool to see him kind of get to a point this year where, especially when we went through injuries and we were bringing other guys along and trying to get other guys ready to play, this opportunity for him to really kind of take that group and bring them along and do stay late after practice, do whatever it took to get those guys ready to play. And like I said, those are the things to me, more than any Bible study or any chapel service you can go to, when you're serving another guy in his journey, in his career, in his journey in life, and when you're saying, man, I want to help you do the job well, I think those things are closer to the heart of God than anything, because you're meeting a physical need. You know what I mean? And so then emotionally and spiritually, the other things can connect because you've earned trust by going, man, I want to help you, I want to serve you, I want to help you be a better football player, and help you build your career. And I think he did that for those young guys this year. So it was really cool to see that and see his growth and that transpire throughout the season.
Have you ever been around a team that's had so many injuries and still was able to kind of win a title like that? I've never seen anything like it.
Man, it was crazy. Like, it was just like, who's next, man? And it
was you, right?
Yeah. It ended up being me.
All the way to the end.
I was the last guy, but it was just funny. And I think Doug's leadership through it was great. I think the veterans in our locker room, Malcolm Fletcher, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Brooks, like Jason Peters, these veteran guys that have been around this team for so long, just their leadership was so cool to watch. And for me, those situations that I've been in where it's rebuilds and it's reboots and we're trying to put this team together. And so there's this kind of this expectation every year. Everybody starts out 0-0 and everybody's got hopes for the Super Bowl. But realistically, teams know where they are in their building process. And so you had this team that felt really good about where we were at the start of the season. And so to have all these injuries and kind of feel like the belief started to slip, and then to watch the group collectively and to be in that moment so many times where I've been on a 5-7 team going, man, we got to run the table to get in. Can we do it? And in your mind, you're going, yeah, we can do it. But knowing like the team is so young, or the team is whatever the case may be, not talented enough just yet in a rebuilding process, and it doesn't happen. And I've seen that happen so many times in my career. Those are situations I've been in.
Yeah.
And to be in this situation this year and to see the leadership and to see the group collectively believe, even as guys kept dropping and kept getting injured, it was so cool and so special for me, because I think it's one of those things that I've chased my whole career of just like, if the group can just believe and we can have enough veteran leadership and enough belief, from the coaching staff and everybody to get it turned, we can do this. And to see it kind of fall flat so many times in my career, to see it get done this year, and we didn't go all the way, we lost in the first round, but to run the table the way we did, for Carson to play the way he did down the stretch, it was cool, and it was special for me, just given my career history. It was special to be a part of, and I'm very thankful for that.
Josh McCown's been our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Josh, a couple of questions more here in the interview. Just as far as your rhythms and disciplines go, you had a weird year, right? And just a kind of crazy back and forth, as we've talked about. Then you have the injury, but still your relationship with Jesus is yours. It's your own. What are some of the ways that you have found, you've been doing this a long time now as a player, to stay connected to the Lord in your personal relationship? Certainly chapel and Bible study and, kind of like accountability and being excellent are all great representations of your faith, but that staying poured into in terms of a relationship with the Lord. How have you seen that play out for you as far as disciplines, rhythms go?
Yeah. So I would say at some point in the day, just being able to kind of quiet everything that's going on and just spend some time, just reflecting and whatever category you want to put that in, meditation, prayer, but just kind of spending that time and getting centered and getting kind of, I think so many times, especially in the day to day, we get so busy that the nearness to what we've professed as Christians, as like, Jesus being the center of it and trying to follow, his example and the things that he teaches us in Scripture. I think we get so busy that we get kind of far from that, and just so to be recentered with that, to feel connected to that again, and to go, that's where my hope is. That's where my peace comes from. That's always vital to me every day. And it's usually, first thing in the morning when I get out of bed, just because, it's just the thankfulness of waking up and getting to see another day and trying to do that, as much as possible. And so that's one thing, for me. A lot of times it's either through podcasts like this one or listening to other speakers share about their faith or through music, so those are different mediums for me that continually, help me, meditate on God's goodness and who I want to be and who I want to represent day in and day out.
So those listening are probably thinking, Romano, would you just ask Josh what's next? What the heck's going to happen here going forward? So I'm going to ask you now, Josh, what's next? You're 41 in July, coaching, commentating, playing, all of the above. What's happening next for Josh McCown this year? Any idea?
So that quiet time I was just talking about,
yeah.
I'm gonna have a lot of that. I'm gonna have a lot of time spent, just trying to make sure, my heart's right as I move through the world and can, have a good view of who God is in my life and be able to serve my family correctly and then, by extension, my community. So I don't know. We'll see. There's always different options on the table, and have not closed the door on anything yet. I'm as I heal up here, that's my main focus, is just getting this hamstring right and back to 100%. And I got some boys that are in high school that I'm coaching up, and having a fun time, kind of jumping right back into the high school thing, and we're starting our off-season program, and so that'll be my focus, and just serving there, and I think, as time goes, it'll reveal itself, even more to me of what I want to do. But right now I'm just going to, focus on what what I can do today to serve the high school and be around these kids. And then whatever happens down the road, as those decisions start to come, we'll say yes to something or say no to something, and we'll close some doors and move on. But having been through it already now once, kind of understanding the delicacy of of going through retirement like I did in June and all that stuff. I don't know that I'll jump to any decisions just because I want to keep my mind open to everything. And I think what I feel right now, the best thing I'm being called to is just to serve here, serve my family first, and then serve here at the high school as best I can.
That's good. I could see you in 10 years. I'm guessing you're going to probably be coaching or serving in some sort of capacity anyways, right? Because it sounds like you got such a heart for teenagers and young people and just kind of being around them and pouring life into them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I love it. I love the game of football. I love sports in general. I love the game of football. And I think for me, just what team in general communicates to us as humans. And I believe, I always equate it to, I believe that was, God's intention, for the universe was to be unified through his son, Jesus, and how powerful and cool humanity is when we find something to get behind that we all agree on, and we can move forward and love the world correctly. And team does that. When we put that helmet on and we all have the same decals on and we're all pushing for the same thing, because it doesn't matter where you're from, what race or ethnicity or socioeconomic background you come from. We're together and we're moving forward to win the football game and to come together. And so I love sports, and I love the opportunity to build into young people through it. And so who knows? But I love being around it, and I would definitely think that, hopefully 10 years from now, I'm working in some capacity with some sort of team, helping them build and believe and work towards something.
Yeah, that's been really good. Josh McCown's been our guest here on Sports Spectrum. All right, last question, Josh. And instead of asking you what the Lord's teaching you now, which we ask to all of our guests here on the show, and you've kind of answered that, I think, a lot in some of the different questions that we've already discussed and topics. What's the great lesson the Lord has shown you in the past, say, year? So as I asked you before, when we went back a year ago, it was spring of 2019, and You're not sure. If you could have said, oh, this is what it's going to end up being at the end of 2019, you probably would have laughed at me. But and through that and just kind of staying connected to God, what's the great lesson that he's shown you through maybe these past 12 months or so?
Yeah, you know what? That's an awesome question. And I would say this, for me, I think so much of anything that comes up, I jump into trying to fix it, solve it, as a man, just trying to, whether it's within my family or it's, on a football team or at the high school, whatever, like so much of what we do, we want to make things right or do a good job at that thing. And I think, and especially when issues come up or problem solving. And one of the biggest things I think that I've been reminded of, especially this past year, was just that to stop and to pray and to talk to God about it before I go through it. Because I think so many times I'll be halfway through it, reasoning with God about why it's not turning out the way I want it to. And I always feel like there's a reminder of like, yeah, we haven't even talked about this yet though. Like, like there's an opportunity, I think that we can always go to God first. And a lot of times in that moment, in that prayer time, so many things get sorted out that make the situation not as big as it really feels. But I think a lot of times in my flesh, I just run into the situation and go, watch this. I'm going to fix this. I think that's pride saying I'm going to work this thing out myself, instead of saying, you know what, I'm gonna walk with God through this, and it's going to give me better clarity, better poise in the situation to make the best decisions possible. So I think that's what I would say that I feel like God showed me the last year.
He is Josh McCown. We'll see if he's a former quarterback or a current quarterback. Who knows? But he's right now healing up, a healing quarterback right now. And we just appreciate you, Josh. Thanks so much for being here on Sports Spectrum and for being willing to share your faith, your journey. And listen, we'll do this again hopefully next year, and we'll see what the Lord did in the next 12 months. So thanks for joining us, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. God bless you, bro.
And that was Josh McCown, longtime NFL quarterback, just this past season in 2019 with the Philadelphia Eagles. And you won't find a better dude in the NFL than Josh McCown. Everybody I've talked to, everybody that's come across Josh McCown in their lives are just better people for having known him, including myself. And I'm grateful to have been able to talk to Josh on a couple of occasions and been in a couple conferences with him. And he's the real deal. He really is. And he's a great quarterback. He is a great man of God. He loves his family. His family is such an awesome family. He's got a couple boys, as he said, are in high school right now. And Josh just loves people and he loves God. And that's the great commandment, right? Love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself and love others. And that's what Josh does. And we're just grateful to have him here on the podcast, grateful to have him here on Sports Spectrum. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2020 with Josh. Certainly we want him to heal. And, maybe he'll be back with Philly. Maybe he'll be another backup quarterback to Carson and they had something going there. And maybe there's an opportunity for him to return. Maybe he'll be at ESPN and you'll watch him on NFL Live during the season next year. And maybe he'll do neither of those and he'll just be coaching his kids. Who knows what the Lord has in store for Josh McCown, but we will find out hopefully soon. And either way, we're just grateful that he came on here and joined us on Sports Spectrum. We wish Josh nothing but the best. We thank him and we thank you for listening to this episode of Sports Spectrum. If this is the first time that you've discovered Sports Spectrum, thank you. Great to have you here. A couple things. You can subscribe to our podcast right now, wherever podcasts are found. Click that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum. As you see, we have tons of interviews here on this podcast, a lot of great guests who've talked about sports and talked about faith in Jesus, and we were able to bring that name of Jesus back into the conversation, as our introduction says. And this is a great way to stay in touch with all that we're doing at Sports Spectrum through the podcast. Then you can also check out our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the home base for all of our content here at Sports Spectrum is our website, sportspectrum.com. And lastly, you can hit us up on our social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. All sorts of content all day long on the intersection of sports and faith in God. It is Sports Spectrum, and we're so grateful that you listened and checked out our show today. We'll see you next time. We got a brand new episode coming your way tomorrow here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.